Hello everyone, this is Ralph Daly. Welcome back. For my final speech, I'm picking a topic that has been both controversial and a hot-button topic in the mainstream media for the past couple of years. But it's also been going into a long, struggling battle that's been going on since the 1970s. The topic I am discussing about is gay marriage. Is it right or wrong? But also in this presentation, not just debating if it's right or wrong, I will be presenting the cons and pros of same-sex marriage. To start off, immediate statement that I will make is that gay marriage should be legal on all standards, whether it's between a woman and a woman or a man and a man. They should not be singled out or discriminated whatsoever outside the traditional heterosexual married couples. Here are some of the pros for gay same-sex marriage. The first pro is same-sex couples should be allowed to publicly celebrate their commitment in the same way as heterosexual couples. Same-sex couples should have the same benefits enjoyed by heterosexual married couples as well. Gay marriage is protected by the Constitution's commitments to liberty and equality, more referring to the First Amendment. Denying same-sex couples the right to marry stigmatizes gay and lesbian families as inferior and sends the message that it's acceptable to discriminate against them. Gay marriage legalization is correlated with lower divorce rates, while gay marriage bans are correlated with higher divorce rates, being that the traditional marriage rate, when you look at divorces in the United States and around the world, the percentages have gone up year by year, whereas in same-sex couples have been proven and have been studied to stay longer together than outside of heterosexual couples. Even though there's some pros to this debate, there are some cons that can be argued very well. One of the main cons is the institution of marriage has traditionally been defined as between a man and a woman. Also, marriage is a privilege, not a right. Marriage should not be extended to same-sex couples because they cannot produce children together. Marriage is a religious right between a man and a woman. Gay marriage is incompatible with the beliefs, sacred texts, and traditions of many religious groups. And the last one, which I will touch on at the end of this presentation, gay marriage may lead to more children being raised in same-sex households, which are not an optimum environment because children need both a mother and a father. Here are some statistics and polls that kind of show the changing trend amongst the general population about same-sex gay marriage. In 2003, a couple of studies were shown that over close to 60% of the people that were polled opposed same-sex marriage. You had a small 32% that were in favor, and about 9% that were undecided, didn't want to discuss it. But just over a decade later, you see almost 50% of the general population that was polled is in favor of same-sex marriage, while the people that oppose it is still around 43%. Also in the same sense, there have been 5 myths that have been put out there about gay marriage. One of the myths is letting gay couples get married redefines marriage. Another one is same-sex marriage hurts children. A collision with religious liberty is unavoidable. Another one, the entire country must have the same policy. And the 5th one is the battle is almost over. Most people think the battle is almost over before this battle, but it's going to be a continuing battle for years and years to come, until the population in the world can come to an exact agreement on how to handle same-sex marriage and if it can be acceptable in the religious groups as well. Here are some of the key events throughout the same-sex marriage timeline. Now, what you will see in some of the earlier key events, they were not victories for same-sex marriage. For example, October 15, 1971, the Minnesota Supreme Court rules in Baker v. Nelson that prohibited same-sex marriage does not violate the U.S. Constitution. Another one was on November 9, 1973. The Kentucky Supreme Court of Appeals rules in Jones v. Hallahan that prohibiting same-sex marriage does not violate the U.S. Constitution, in the same category as the one 2 years prior. One of the biggest blows early to same-sex marriage was in September 21, 1996. The Defense of Marriage Act is signed by President Bill Clinton. In addition to banning federal recognition of same-sex marriage, It upholds the right of every state to decide whether to recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states. As time went on, it almost seemed like it wasn't going to go anywhere in the positive direction. Because on July 8, 2002, a law was passed by Congress and signed by President George W. Bush establishing a domestic partnership registry in the District of Columbia. Under the law, same-sex couples are given access to many of the state's rights afforded to married couples. This was a small victory just after the turn of the 21st century. As the years went on, some of the more key battles started to come up. One, from February 12th to March 11th, for same-sex marriage couples, San Francisco officials, under the consent of Mayor Gavin Newsom, issued marriage license to approximately 4,000 same-sex couples. The California Supreme Court subsequently nullifies the marriage, determining that Mayor Newsom had overstepped his authority. Once again, a very bad blow to the same-sex marriage debate. Also in that same year, on February 24th, President George W. Bush announced support for a federal constitution amendment that would ban same-sex marriage nationwide. This was a big fear back then. Later that year, on November 2nd, voters in the following states approved state constitutional amendments banning same-sex marriage: Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, and Utah. In 2005, there started to be a turning point for a lot of the positive turnarounds for same-sex marriage. On April 20th, 2005, Governor Jody Rell signed into law a civil union bill granting same-sex couples in Connecticut access to the same state's rights as married couples. The state is the first to pass a civil union bill voluntarily through the legislature and without judicial intervention. As years went on, there were some key victories, but also some key defeats. On May 15, 2008, the California Supreme Court overturns the state's ban on gay marriage. However, the victory for advocates of same-sex marriage is short-lived, as it was nullified and repealed later that year. But a key moment in the same-sex marriage timeline was on June 17, 2008, where the first legal same-sex marriages are performed in California. On November 4th, another big blow to the same-sex marriage debate was when California voters approved an initiative to ban gay marriage. It is estimated that 18,000 same-sex couples have married in California since the state Supreme Court gave them the right in May. But things really started to turn around after around 2011, when President Barack Obama, on February 23rd, him and his administration announced that it believes the Constitution forbids unequal treatment of gays and lesbians in almost all cases, and that the Justice Department will no longer oppose legal challenges to the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act. Also in that same year, in July of 2011, President Obama calls for a repeal of the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, which defines marriage as between a man and a woman and withholds federal benefits from gay married couples. And one of the biggest, probably the most prolific events in our history, in September of 2012, the Democratic Party becomes the first major political party to approve a platform that supports same-sex marriage. And as it started to go along, you start to see more of a trend of a lot of people in favor of it, as from recent Pew Research Center polls reveal. In 2013, overall, 51% of Americans said they support same-sex marriage, while 42% still opposed it. But one of the biggest victories for same-sex marriage came on June 26, 2013. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 ruling, strikes down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which had denied legal recognition of same-sex marriages even in the states where such marriages are legal. And also in August 14th of that same year, the Pentagon announces that it will grant special leave to military personnel in same-sex relationships so that they can get married in the states where such unions are legal. And also on the flip side, on the cons, a lot of religious leaders around the world had really been against the transcending and the changing viewpoints on the traditional marriages. Cardinal Timothy Dolan, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and Archbishop Salvador Corleone of San Francisco, chair of the U.S. Bishops Subcommittee for the Promotion of Defense of Marriage. They both had some very stiff words to say about the rulings that the Supreme Court did with the Defense of Marriage Act, when it basically took away what was considered to be the traditional marriage between a man and a woman, and is now allowing, homosexuals, as they call it, but also in same-sex and gay couples, to officially get married. As you can see, there's more and more quotes from religious leaders around the world that were against it. Not many were in favor of it. Most of the time, there was really only there was one certain religious group that was mostly in favor of it, but they were also against it at the same time. Most of the things come from Proposition 8, which was known as Prop 8, that went against the ban of same-sex marriage. One of the key quotes that I do want to show you, and it's also going to tie in with what I said earlier towards the beginning of the presentation, that I would hit on towards the very end. One quote that I will say that was in favor from a religious leader is from Welton Gaddy from the Interfaith Alliance. I am hopeful that today's decision of striking down DOMA as unconstitutional and overturning Proposition 8 case on standing will be followed by continued victories in this fight for equality. That's a majority of the court recognized in the DOMA case that this was an issue of equal protection denied is no small victory. To those critics who will try to characterize these decisions as a threat to their religious freedom, let me say they could not be more wrong. No members of the clergy can be required to perform a religious ceremony that goes against the dictates of their faith. And thanks to the protections afforded by the First Amendment, nothing in today's decision changes that fact. Interfaith Alliance's work for LGBT equality is not finished, and we will not be finished until all Americans are afforded the rights restored today for the people of California. This last quote that I'm going to read really hits a nerve with me. It comes from Reverend William Owens, president of the Coalition of African American Pastors. We are devastated that the Supreme Court succumbed to political pressure by voting to weaken this sacred institution. They neglected our most precious children who needed a mother and a father united in marriage for healthy development. On that last quote, and why my works cited, where you can see a lot of the sources I got this. Me personally, people who have demonized, discriminated, even name-called same-sex couples, here's a little history lesson for you. My full name is Ralph Patrick Daly, and I was raised by a lesbian couple my entire life. They tried no different to change me, push me in that direction, or even put the thoughts in my head. They gave me the ability to make my own choices as a man as I grew older. And I could have not been more happy or more proud to have a better family. This has been Ralph Daly. Until next time, thank you for watching.